What if one single act of courage, a moment of defiance against a powerful bully, didn't just risk your livelihood, but catapulted you into a world beyond your wildest dreams, or perhaps your most terrifying nightmares? Elara. A struggling waitress thought she was just doing the right thing when she defended a humble janitor. She expected to be fired. Instead, a cryptic message and a first-class ticket arrived the next day, whisking her away to an opulent, isolated island resort. But paradise always has a price, and this one is shrouded in secrets. Get ready. The clatter of fine china and the murmur of hushed, expensive conversations were the soundtrack to Elara's life. She moved with a practiced grace through the labyrinth of tables at The Argent, a restaurant so exclusive it felt less like a dining establishment and more like a vault for the city's gilded elite. Each night, Elara donned her starched uniform, a smile pinned to her face, her own anxieties carefully tucked away like a crumpled napkin. She was an aspiring artist, her tiny apartment overflowing with canvases she couldn't afford to frame, and dreams that felt increasingly out of reach. The Argent paid the bills just barely, but it was a soul-crushing exchange. Tonight, the air was particularly thick with self-importance. A humid summer evening had driven the city's wealthiest indoors, seeking refuge in the refrigerated grandeur of The Argent. Elara balanced a tray laden with crystal glasses, her eyes scanning for the almost imperceptible flick of a wrist that signaled a summons. Her station included Table 7, currently occupied by Mr. Alistair Sterling, a man whose net worth was discussed in financial columns with the same reverence usually reserved for minor deities. Sterling was a regular known for his insatiable appetite for the restaurant's most expensive offerings and his equally voracious disdain for anyone he deemed beneath him. Tonight he was in rare form, his voice a venomous drawl that cut through the ambient noise. His companions, two younger men who mirrored his expensive suit and sycophantic laughter, hung on his every word. Elara delivered their initial round of drinks, a Macallan 25 for Sterling, neat of course, and retreated trying to become invisible. It was during a lull as Elara was meticulously resetting a nearby table that she first noticed the incident unfold. Mr. Henderson, the restaurant's elderly janitor, was quietly mopping a small spill near the entrance to the private dining suites. Henderson was a fixture at the Argent, a gentle, stoop-shouldered man with kind eyes and a quiet dignity that Elara had always admired. He moved with a quiet efficiency. A ghost in the opulent machine, ensuring the pristine image of the Argent remained untarnished. He rarely spoke, but his quiet nods and occasional shy smiles were a small source of warmth in Elara's otherwise sterile workday. Sterling gesticulating wildly as he recounted some corporate conquest gestured with his fork, sending a morsel of his pan-seared foie gras skittering across the polished marble floor. It landed with a soft splat, inches from Henderson's worn-out shoe. Ugh, clumsy oaf, Sterling boomed, his face contorting in disgust. He didn't look at Henderson, but rather at his companions, seeking their affirmation. Can't even manage to stay out of the way. Someone get this thing cleaned up. And get him out of my sight. He's spoiling my appetite. Henderson, his face flushing a deep crimson, leaned his mop bucket aside and bent down slowly, his old joints protesting to pick up the discarded food with a paper towel from his cart. His hand trembled slightly. Elara felt a hot surge of anger rise within her. She'd seen Sterling be rude, before dismissive arrogant. But this was different. This was a deliberate, cruel humiliation of a man who did nothing but his job a job. Sterling and his ilk would never deign to do themselves. Before she could second-guess herself, before the practical voice in her head could scream about her rent and her unpaid art supplies. Elara was moving. She placed her tray of water goblets on a nearby serving stand and walked directly towards table 7. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice surprisingly steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. Sterling looked up, his eyes cold and grey, like a winter sky fixing on her. "What is it now? Did you not hear me? I want this mess dealt with." He waved a dismissive hand towards Henderson, who was still stooped, trying to make himself smaller. "Mr. Henderson was simply doing his job, sir." Elara stated, her gaze unwavering. The spill was accidental, and he was cleaning it as discreetly as possible. One of Sterling's companions snickered. "Oh, got a little crusader here, have we?" Sterling's lip curled into a sneer. "And who asked for your opinion, sweetheart? Are you his keeper, or just looking for a bigger tip by defending the staff?" The insult stung, but Elara held her ground. "He deserves to be treated with respect. Everyone does." "Respect." Sterling scoffed, his voice rising, drawing the attention of nearby diners. Conversations faltered. Eyes turned towards the unfolding drama. Respect is earned, not given away, like free breadsticks. This man, he gestured again at Henderson, who now stood looking utterly mortified, is a janitor. His job is to be invisible and clean up messes, not to be respected by the likes of me. His job is essential for this restaurant to function, a restaurant you choose to dine in. Elara countered, her voice gaining a slight tremor, not from fear, but from the intensity of her conviction. He works hard, likely harder than many people in this room, for a fraction of the reward. Mr. Davies, the restaurant manager, was now gliding towards them. His face a mask of forced calm, but his eyes radiating panic. "Is there a problem here, Mr. Sterling, Elara? Is everything all right?" Sterling pushed back his chair slightly, his posture aggressive. "This little waitress of yours has an attitude problem, Davies. A big one. She seems to think it's her place to lecture me on etiquette." "Elara." Mr. Davies said, his voice tight, a clear warning in his tone. "Perhaps you should return to your duties." Elara looked from Mr. Davies' strained face to Henderson's downcast eyes, and then back to Sterling's smug, arrogant expression. The fight wasn't just for Henderson anymore. It was for a sliver of her own self-respect, a refusal to be cowed by wealth and power. "I will," Elara said, turning back to Sterling, "as soon as you apologize to Mr. Henderson for your rudeness." A collective gasp, quickly suppressed, rippled through the nearby tables. Mr. Davies looked as if he might faint. Sterling's face, which had been a mask of arrogant amusement, slowly turned a shade of puce. He rose from his chair, his considerable height towering over Elara. "Apologize," he hissed, his voice dangerously low. "You insolent little brat. You'll be lucky to be cleaning toilets alongside him by tomorrow." "Davies, fire her. Fire her now, or I'll make sure this establishment gets a review that will curdle milk across the state." Mr. Davies wrung his hands. "Mr. Sterling, please. Elara, go to the staff room. Now." Elara looked at Henderson. He finally met her gaze, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Gratitude, perhaps, or fear for her. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of his head, as if to say, "It's not worth it." But it was too late. The words were out. The stand was made. With a final defiant look at Sterling, Elara turned and walked towards the staff room, the silence of the dining room pressing in on her back. She could feel Sterling's glare burning into her, and she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that her time at the Argent, her precarious financial stability, had just come to an abrupt and dramatic end. She had stood up for the unseen man, and now she was about to become unseen herself. The walk to the staff room felt like a mile. Each step echoed with the imagined pronouncements of her dismissal. Mr. Davies would be in shortly, his face a mixture of apology and stern necessity. She'd have to pack her few belongings from her locker, a well-thumbed book of poetry, a spare apron, a fading photo of her late grandmother, and walk out into the humid night jobless. She sat on a worn bench, the adrenaline slowly ebbing away, leaving behind a cold dread. What had she done? Her rent was due next week. Her art supplies were dwindling. That commission for Mrs. Petrov's prize-winning poodle portrait, her only other source of income, was still weeks from completion and payment. Mr. Henderson appeared at the doorway a few minutes later, his mop and bucket conspicuously absent. He shuffled in his eyes, still avoiding hers. "Miss Elara." He began, his voice raspy, unused to extended conversation. I am so sorry. You shouldn't have." Elara managed a weak smile. "It's all right, Mr. Henderson. He was being a bully. Someone had to say something. But your job," he wrung his gnarled hands. "It's my fault." "No, it isn't," Elara said firmly. "It's his fault for being a horrible human being, and mine for having a temper, I guess." She sighed. "Don't worry about me. I'll figure something out. I always do." Mr. Henderson looked at her then, a long, searching gaze that made her feel strangely scrutinized. "You are a good person, Elara. A rare thing." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a slightly crumpled but surprisingly high-quality envelope. It was thick, creamy, and bore no markings. This arrived for you earlier, at the staff entrance, addressed simply to the Waitress with Courage." Elara frowned. "For me? Who would send me something like that?" He shrugged a slight, almost imperceptible movement. "I do not know. But I was asked to give it to you, especially if certain events unfolded tonight." A chill snaked down Elara's spine. "What do you mean, if certain events unfolded?" Henderson just pressed the envelope into her hand. "Perhaps it is best you open it." Before Elara could question him further, Mr. Davies entered, his face grim. "Elara, can I have a word?" Henderson slipped out as silently as he'd entered, leaving Elara alone to face the music, the mysterious envelope clutched in her hand. "Elara." Mr. Davies began, his voice heavy with regret. "Mr. Sterling is one of our most influential patrons. His displeasure carries significant weight. He has demanded your immediate termination, and frankly, after that public display, regardless of the rights or wrongs, I have very little choice." Elara nodded. She'd expected this. "I understand, Mr. Davies." "I am truly sorry," he said, and she thought she detected a hint of genuine remorse. "You're a good waitress. But this was too much." He paused. "You can collect your final pay tomorrow. Please leave your uniform." And just like that, it was over. She was officially unemployed. Numbly, Elara gathered her few things. The walk home through the bustling city streets felt surreal. The usual cacophony of traffic chatter and distant sirens seemed muted, as if she were moving through a dream. Back in her small apartment, the scent of turpentine and oil paints, usually a comfort, now seemed to mock her. How would she afford these small luxuries now? She sat on her paint-splattered stool, the unopened envelope lying on her rickety kitchen table. The waitress with courage. Who knew who could have anticipated her outburst? Henderson's words about the envelope arriving before the incident contingent on it happening echoed in her mind. It was deeply unsettling. With trembling fingers, she tore it open. Inside there was no letter of explanation, no sender's address. Only 2 items. The first was a first-class, open-ended plane ticket. The destination was listed simply as Isla Perdida. The airline was a private charter. She'd never heard of Seraph Wings Aviation. The second was a small, exquisitely printed card. On it, in elegant calligraphy, were the words, "Courage is a currency rarer than gold. Your account has been noted. A new chapter awaits those brave enough to turn the page. Your flight departs when you choose. Transportation to the airfield will be arranged upon your signal. Details for signaling are on the reverse." Elara flipped the card. On the back, a single symbol was printed, a stylized phoenix, its wings unfurled. Beneath it, a phone number. Isla Perdida. Lost Island. It sounded like something out of a fantasy novel. Her mind raced. Was this a joke, a very elaborate, cruel prank orchestrated by Sterling or his friends? But the ticket felt real, the card stock was expensive. And Henderson's involvement, his strange foreknowledge. She spent a sleepless night wrestling with the enigma. Fear warred with a desperate, flickering hope. She was jobless with bleak prospects. The art world was notoriously difficult to break into without connections or money, neither of which she possessed. This mysterious offer, however outlandish, was something. A door possibly leading to a cliff edge, but a door nonetheless. The next morning, the harsh light of day did little to dispel the strangeness of it all. Her bank account balance was a cruel reminder of her reality. She looked at the phoenix symbol, a symbol of rebirth. What did she have to lose that wasn't already lost or on the verge of being so? Her pride, her safety. The fear was a cold knot in her stomach. This could be anything. Human trafficking, some bizarre reality show, a cult. But then she remembered Henderson's kind eyes, his quiet dignity. He wouldn't be party to something truly evil, would he? And the phrase, "the waitress with courage." It implied that her act of defiance wasn't a mistake, but a qualifier. By midday, fueled by cheap coffee and a growing sense of recklessness, she made her decision. She had to know. She picked up her phone, her hand surprisingly steady, and dialed the number from the card. It rang only once. A calm, androgynous voice answered, devoid of any inflection. "Seraph Wings Aviation. Your signal is received. A car will be at your address in 1 hour. Please bring only what is essential for a warm climate. Further instructions will be provided en route." The line went dead. 1 hour. Elara stared at her phone, the silence in her apartment suddenly deafening. This was it. She was either incredibly brave or monumentally foolish. Perhaps both. She packed a small duffel bag, a few changes of light clothing, her sketchbook and pencils. She couldn't bear to leave them behind, toiletries, and the small framed photo of her grandmother. She took one last look around her tiny apartment, a place of struggle, but also of dreams. Exactly 1 hour later, a sleek black sedan, its windows tinted to an impossible darkness, purred to a stop outside her building. There was no logo, no identifying marks. The driver, a woman in a sharp, dark suit and sunglasses, didn't speak, merely opened the rear door for Elara. As the car pulled away from the curb, Elara didn't look her back. She was heading into the unknown, armed with nothing but a sliver of courage and a plane ticket to a lost island. The city, with its familiar skyline and crushing indifference, receded behind her. A new chapter, as the card had promised, was indeed beginning. Whether it was a fairy tale or a horror story remained to be seen. The journey to the private airfield was a blur of silent efficiency. The driver offered no conversation, and Elara, her mind a whirlwind of questions and anxieties, didn't press. The airfield itself was small, exclusive, tucked away in a remote corner of the state she never knew existed. There were no bustling terminals, no queues, just a handful of sleek private jets gleaming under the afternoon sun. She was escorted directly to one, a stunningly modern aircraft, with the same phoenix emblem from the card subtly embossed beneath the cockpit window. The interior was the epitome of luxury. Plush leather seats, polished wood paneling, and a fully stocked refreshment bar. A flight attendant, as impeccably dressed and discreet as the driver, greeted her with a polite smile and showed her to a seat. There were no other passengers. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Elara." The attendant said, her voice soft and melodic. "Our flight time to Isla Perdida will be approximately 6 hours. Please make yourself comfortable. Is there anything I can get for you before we depart Isla Perdida?" What is it like?" Elara asked the question, tumbling out before she could stop it. A slight enigmatic smile touched the attendant's lips. "It is unique, Ms. Elara. I believe you will find it memorable." And with that, she retreated to the galley. The flight was unnervingly smooth. Elara tried to read, then to sketch, but her concentration was shot. She gazed out the window at the endless expanse of clouds, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and purple, feeling utterly untethered from her old life. Who was behind this? What did they want from her? The opulence was undeniable, but it felt conditional. A gilded cage, perhaps just a much larger and more comfortable one than the Argent. As darkness fell outside, the pilot's voice came over the intercom, calm and professional. "We will be commencing our descent into Isla Perdida shortly. Please ensure your seatbelt is fastened. The local time is 9:17 p.m. Elara peered out the window, but all she could see was an inky blackness, the vast, unblinking expanse of the ocean. Then gradually, a string of lights appeared, like scattered jewels on black velvet. As they descended further, she could make out the vague silhouette of an island, mountainous and verdant, even in the darkness. The landing was as smooth as the takeoff. When the jet door opened, a wave of warm, fragrant air washed over her heavy, with the scent of tropical flowers and salt. It was intoxicating. She was met on the tarmac by a man dressed in a crisp white linen suit. He was tall, with sun-kissed skin and a welcoming smile that seemed genuine. "Miss Elara, welcome to Isla Perdida. I am Matteo, your host liaison. Please allow me." He gestured towards an electric golf cart waiting nearby. Her single duffel bag was already being loaded by an unseen attendant. The ride from the small airstrip was through a lush, manicured jungle. Towering palm trees swayed gently in the night breeze, and the air was alive with the chirping of unseen creatures. The resort, when they reached it, was breathtaking. It wasn't a single monolithic hotel, but rather a collection of luxurious, secluded villas nestled into the landscape, each with its own private infinity pool overlooking the ocean. The architecture was a seamless blend of modern design and natural materials, dark wood, local stone, and vast expanses of glass. Soft lights illuminated meandering pathways, and the sound of gentle waves lapping the shore was ever present. It was undeniably paradise. Matteo escorted her to a stunning villa perched on a cliff overlooking a moonlit cove. "This will be your accommodation during your stay, Ms. Elara. I trust you will find it to your liking." The villa was larger than her entire apartment building back home. A spacious living area opened onto a vast terrace with a private pool that seemed to merge with the ocean beyond. The bedroom had a king-sized bed draped in fine linen, and the bathroom was a spa-like sanctuary with a freestanding tub and an outdoor shower. On a polished mahogany desk, a sleek tablet displayed a welcome message. "Relax and rejuvenate, Elara. Your journey has just begun." "It's incredible," Elara managed, genuinely awestruck. Matteo smiled. "We aim to please. Dinner has been arranged for you in your villa tonight. Tomorrow morning, I will return at 9 a.m. to provide you with a more formal orientation and introduce you to some of the other guests." "Other guests," Elara latched onto the phrase. So she wasn't alone. Indeed, Matteo said, his smile unwavering. Isla Perdida has a way of bringing interesting people together. Rest well, Ms. Elara. He gave a slight bow and departed, leaving her alone in the opulent silence. Dinner, when it arrived, was a culinary masterpiece delivered by silent, unobtrusive staff. She ate on her terrace, the sound of the waves her only companion, trying to process the sheer unreality of it all. From waitress to what honored guest in an exclusive, secret paradise. It made no sense. Sleep was elusive. Her mind replayed the events of the past 48 hours. Sterling's sneering face, Henderson's quiet dignity, the cryptic card, the luxurious flight. And now this. What was the catch? Because there was always a catch. The next morning, Elara awoke to the sun streaming through her panoramic windows, the ocean a dazzling turquoise. She felt a strange mix of apprehension and excitement. She sketched the view from her terrace, the vibrant colors and dramatic landscape a welcome distraction. At precisely 9 a.m., Matteo arrived as promised. "Good morning, Ms. Elara. I trust you slept well." Surprisingly. "Yes," she admitted. "Matteo, can you tell me more about this place? Who owns it? Why am I here?" Matteo's smile remained pleasant, but unrevealing. "All will be made clear in due time. For now, please come with me. It is time you met some of the others." He led her along a winding path through gardens bursting with exotic flowers towards a larger central pavilion that overlooked a pristine white sand beach. As they approached, Elara could hear voices and laughter. About a dozen people were gathered there, enjoying a lavish breakfast buffet. They were a diverse group, varying in age and apparent background, yet all bore an air of subtle sophistication. Elara felt a pang of self-consciousness in her simple linen trousers and cotton top, though Matteo had assured her the dress code was island casual. Matteo clapped his hands lightly, drawing attention. "Good morning, everyone. May I introduce our newest arrival, Ms. Elara Vance." A polite murmur of greetings went around the group. Elara offered a tentative smile. Matteo began the introductions. There was a renowned scientist, Dr. Aris Thorne, whose groundbreaking work in renewable energy Elara vaguely recalled reading about. There was a celebrated musician, Lena Petrova, whose melancholic cello concertos Elara actually owned. There was a former investigative journalist, Marcus Cole, who had exposed a major political scandal a few years back. There was a young tech prodigy, Kenji Tanaka, who had developed a revolutionary AI algorithm. And to Ilara's utter astonishment, there was also a quiet, unassuming woman named Mrs. Abigail Gable, a retired schoolteacher from a small town in Iowa, who had apparently spent her life volunteering at local charities. What did these people, brilliant, accomplished, or exceptionally kind, have in common with her, a recently fired waitress? And then, as Matteo gestured towards a man standing slightly apart, observing the scene with an air of detached amusement, Ilara's blood ran cold. It couldn't be, but it was. Leaning against a pillar, a smirk playing on his lips, was Mr. Alistair Sterling. He looked as surprised to see her as she was to see him, though his surprise quickly morphed into a familiar expression of contempt. "Well, well, well," Sterling drawled, his voice cutting through the pleasant morning air. "Look what the tide dragged in. I thought I had you fired, sweetheart. How on earth did you end up in a place like this?" The paradise suddenly felt a lot less welcoming, and the echoes of doubt in Ilara's mind grew to a deafening roar. This mystery island was becoming more complicated and more alarming by the minute. The air in the pavilion crackled with sudden tension. The other guests, who had been chatting amiably, fell silent, their eyes darting between Ilara and the sneering Sterling. Matteo, for the first time since Ilara had met him, looked momentarily flustered, his welcoming smile faltering. "Mr. Sterling." Matteo said, his voice regaining its smooth composure, though a fraction tighter than before. "Miss Vance is a guest just like yourself. All our guests are here by specific invitation." Sterling scoffed, pushing himself off the pillar and taking a step closer, his expensive loafers crunching on the fine gravel path. Invitation. For what? Pouring coffee with a side of insubordination. Don't tell me this resort is so desperate for staff they're flying them in first class. Ilara felt the familiar heat rise in her cheeks. But before she could retort, a new voice, calm and authoritative, cut through the space. "Actually, Mr. Sterling, Miss Vance is here for precisely the same reason as everyone else, because she possesses a quality we value highly." All heads turned. Standing at the entrance to the pavilion, framed by an archway of vibrant bougainvillea, was a figure Ilara had not expected to see again, certainly not here in this bastion of impossible luxury. It was Mr. Henderson, but not the Mr. Henderson she knew. Gone were the worn janitor's overalls and the stooped posture of a man trying to make himself invisible. This Mr. Henderson stood tall, dressed in an impeccably tailored cream linen suit, much like Matteo's, but with an air of quiet command that far surpassed the liaisons. His eyes, no longer downcast, were sharp, intelligent, and held a twinkle of amusement as he surveyed the assembled group. His grey hair was neatly combed, and he carried himself with an understated elegance that spoke of a lifetime of quiet confidence. Mr. Henderson, Ilara breathed her mind, struggling to reconcile the image of the humble janitor with the distinguished man standing before her. Sterling looked equally dumbfounded, his jaw practically hitting the floor. "Henderson, what in blazes are you doing here dressed like that? Did you win the lottery, old man?" Mr. Henderson smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached his eyes. "In a manner of speaking, Mr. Sterling. Yes, I suppose I did. A long time ago." He walked further into the pavilion, his gaze sweeping over the guests, before settling on Ilara. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to formally introduce myself. My name is Edward Henderson Sinclair, and I am the owner and host of Isla Perdida." A stunned silence descended upon the group. Elara felt as though the ground had tilted beneath her feet. The janitor from the Argent. The man she had defended was the architect of this entire, elaborate scenario. Dr. Thorne was the first to break the silence. Sinclair. Edward Henderson. Sinclair. The E.H. Sinclair. The philanthropist, the one who endowed the Sinclair Institute for Ethical Innovation. Mr. Henderson, or rather, Mr. Sinclair, inclined his head. The very same. Lena Petrova gasped. But your foundation is legendarily discreet. You've always avoided the public eye. Why the charade as a janitor? Sinclair's gaze softened. An old habit, Miss Petrova. A way to observe the world without its usual filters. You would be surprised what one learns about human nature when one is perceived as unimportant. His eyes flicked towards Sterling, a subtle but unmistakable rebuke. Sterling for once seemed speechless, his face a kaleidoscope of confusion, indignation, and dawning realization. Sinclair turned his attention back to Elara. Miss Vance, your presence here is a direct result of your actions at the Argent. My associate. He gestured vaguely, perhaps indicating a network of unseen observers, informed me of your courage and integrity. It was a quality I was specifically looking for. But the envelope, Elara stammered. It said it was delivered before the incident contingent on it happening. Indeed, Sinclair confirmed. I've been observing Mr. Sterling's behavior for some time. He frequents establishments in which my less conspicuous employees work. I had a strong suspicion that his particular brand of arrogance would eventually provoke a response from someone of character. You happen to be that someone. The envelope was a contingency plan. So this is some kind of test, Marcus Cole, the journalist asked, his professional curiosity evidently piqued. Not a test. Mr. Cole Sinclair replied, his voice gentle but firm. An invitation, an opportunity. Each of you here has demonstrated unique talents, remarkable achievements, or as in Ms. Vance's and Mrs. Gable's cases, profound compassion and moral fortitude. Isla Perdida is a sanctuary, a place for minds like yours to connect, to create, to be inspired, free from the usual pressures and distractions of the world. Mrs. Gable, the retired school teacher, spoke for the first time, her voice quiet but clear. So we're all chosen. For what purpose, Mr. Sinclair? Sinclair's smile was enigmatic. The purpose, Mrs. Gable, is multifaceted. Part of it is simply to offer a respite, a reward for those who strive to make the world in their own ways a little better. Another part is to foster collaboration. Imagine what a group like this could achieve, given the resources and the environment, to think freely. He paused, his gaze sweeping over them again. And there is one more aspect, a personal one. I am searching for something, or rather, for someone. Someone to whom I can entrust a significant legacy. The implication hung heavy in the air. This wasn't just a luxury vacation. It was an audition of sorts on a grand, almost fantastical scale. Sterling finally found his voice sputtering. Legacy. You mean money? You're looking to give away your fortune to one of us. He looked around, a new avaricious gleam in his eye. Suddenly his disdain for Elara seemed to be recalibrating, assessing her potential as a competitor rather than an inferior. Sinclair's expression became cool. Wealth is but a small part of it, Mr. Sterling. Legacy is about impact, about values, about the future. And it is not something to be won like a trophy. It is something to be earned through character and vision. He then addressed the group more broadly. Over the next few weeks, I invite you to enjoy all that Isla Perdida has to offer. There are no schedules, no compulsory activities, beyond some informal evening discussions I hope you will attend. Pursue your passions, engage with one another, explore, create, and simply be yourselves. His eyes rested on Elara once more, a flicker of warmth in them. Miss Vance, your compassion was a beacon in a rather dim setting. I am eager to see what other lights you hold within you. Elara felt a complex mix of emotions, relief that this wasn't some sinister trap, astonishment at Sinclair's true identity, and a daunting sense of expectation. She had defended a janitor, and in doing so had unwittingly stepped onto a stage she could never have imagined. The other guests began to murmur amongst themselves, processing the incredible revelation. Thorne was already approaching Sinclair, questions forming on his lips. Lena Petrova looked thoughtful, her fingers tapping a silent rhythm on her arm. Marcus Cole had a notebook out, though he wasn't writing, merely observing. Sterling, however, was staring at Elara, his expression unreadable. The power dynamic between them had been utterly inverted. Yesterday, he was the millionaire who could end her career with a word. Today she was a guest of honor, hand-picked by the very man he had unknowingly disdained, a man who clearly held Sterling in low regard. Matteo reappeared, his composure fully restored, and announced that breakfast was fully served and that various island activities, from snorkeling and sailing to private art studios and laboratories, were available. As the group dispersed, some heading for the buffet, others engaging Sinclair in conversation, Elara found herself standing alone for a moment, gazing out at the impossibly blue ocean. Her life had taken such a sharp, unexpected turn. It felt like whiplash. The gilded spoon, her tiny apartment, her financial worries, they all seemed a world away, part of a different life lived by a different person. Mr. Sinclair, or Henderson as she still instinctively thought of him, had called her courageous. But was she? Or had she just been foolishly impulsive? And what did this enigmatic billionaire truly expect from her? A waitress with a penchant for sketching and speaking her mind. The island was no longer just a beautiful mystery. It was a challenge, a canvas. And she, along with a hand-picked group of remarkable individuals, was apparently expected to paint something extraordinary upon it. The stakes, she was beginning to realize, were far higher than just a free vacation. They involved legacy character and a future she couldn't yet fathom. The days on Isla Perdida settled into a rhythm of luxurious freedom and subtle observation. Elara found herself drawn to the island's state-of-the-art art studio, a glass-walled haven overlooking a secluded cove. For the first time in years, she had access to an unlimited supply of high-quality materials. Canvases of all sizes, paints in every conceivable hue, expensive charcoals and fine Italian clay. She lost herself in her work, pouring out the images and emotions that had been dammed up by years of financial constraint and soul-crushing service work. She painted the vibrant hues of the coral reefs she explored while snorkeling, sculpted the proud, weathered face of Mr. Sinclair as Henderson the janitor, and sketched the myriad expressions of her fellow guests. The evening discussions, hosted by Sinclair in the Grand Pavilion or sometimes around a bonfire on the beach, were fascinating. They weren't structured debates, but rather free-flowing conversations about ethics innovation, the future of humanity, the role of art, the nature of compassion. Elara, initially intimidated, found her voice, her contributions, surprisingly well received, particularly by Sinclair, who seemed to listen with genuine interest to her often unconventional perspectives. He had a way of drawing people out, of making them feel their ideas mattered. She formed tentative friendships. Lena Petrova, the cellist, shared Elara's artistic temperament, and they spent hours discussing music and painting, finding common ground in their creative processes. Mrs. Gable, the retired teacher, possessed a quiet wisdom and a deep well of empathy that Elara found comforting. Dr. Thorne, despite his towering intellect, was approachable and eager to explain his complex theories in simpler terms. Kenji Tanaka, the tech prodigy, was shy but brilliant, occasionally sharing glimpses of AI-generated art that both amazed and slightly unsettled Elara. Marcus Cole, the journalist, remained somewhat aloof, always observing, his mind clearly working to piece together the larger puzzle of Sinclair's intentions. Elara often caught him watching her, a thoughtful, appraising look in his eyes. Alistair Sterling was the jarring note in this otherwise harmonious assembly. After the initial shock of Sinclair's revelation, Sterling had adapted with a chilling pragmatism. He transformed from an arrogant bully into a fawning sycophant whenever Sinclair was present, praising his vision, lauding his philanthropy, and attempting to engage him in conversations about finance and investment, clearly trying to position himself as a worthy successor. His attempts were usually met with polite but cool detachment from Sinclair. When Sinclair wasn't around, Sterling's old arrogance would surface, particularly towards Elara. He seemed to view her as his primary rival in this unspoken contest for Sinclair's favor. Still playing the humble artist Vance, he'd sneer encountering her by the koi pond one afternoon. Don't think for a moment that old man Sinclair is fooled by your little salt-of-the-earth routine. He's a billionaire. He understands ambition, not charity sketches. I'm not playing a routine, Mr. Sterling. Elara replied calmly, refusing to be baited. I'm just being myself. Perhaps you should try it sometime. His eyes narrowed. You're out of your depth here, Waitress. This is a game for players, not idealists, and I always play to win. A subtle undercurrent of competition began to ripple through the group. While most interactions were genuine, Elara couldn't shake the feeling that everyone to some degree was aware they were being evaluated. Sinclair never explicitly stated any criteria, but his quiet observations and pointed questions during discussions left little doubt that he was assessing more than just their professional accomplishments. One afternoon, Matteo approached Elara while she was sketching on her villa's terrace. Mr. Sinclair has a small assignment for you, Ms. Vance, if you are willing. An assignment. He has long admired the frescoes of the Villa Borghese in Rome. He wonders if you might be inspired to create a small mural, perhaps, on one of the garden walls near the library. Something that captures the spirit of Isla Perdida as you see it. There is no pressure, of course, only if the idea sparks your creativity. Elara was stunned. A mural. It was a scale she'd never worked on before, a public display of her art. I'd be honored to try, Matteo. The next few days, she threw herself into the project, sketching designs, consulting with Dr. Thorne about weather-resistant pigments, and even discussing thematic elements with Lena, who suggested incorporating a sense of flowing musical rhythm into the composition. She decided to depict the island's lush biodiversity, the interconnectedness of life with subtle portraits of the guests, and Sinclair woven into the foliage, each engaged in their passion. As she worked, she noticed Sterling watching her more frequently, his expression a mixture of derision and something else. Calculation. A few days into the mural project, Sterling approached her, an uncharacteristically pleasant smile on his face. "Vance, that's actually quite impressive," he said, gesturing towards her preliminary chalk outlines on the wall. "I wouldn't have thought you had it in you." Elara was wary. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling." You know, he continued, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "I've been thinking. We got off on the wrong foot. Badly. My behavior at the Argent was regrettable. Stressful day. But this island, Sinclair's vision, it's bigger than petty squabbles." Elara raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "Is that so? Absolutely," Sterling said, his smile widening. "And I think you and we could be a powerful team. You have the artistic flair, the common touch that Sinclair seems to admire. I have the business acumen, the understanding of wealth and structure that his legacy will undoubtedly require. Together we could present a united front. Ensure this legacy he speaks of is managed effectively." Elara stared at him, astonished by his audacity. "Are you suggesting we collaborate to win Mr. Sinclair's favor?" "Precisely." Sterling beamed, as if he'd just proposed the most brilliant idea. "He's old. He won't be around forever. Think about it, Vance. A partnership. We could ensure we are the ones chosen. Then we share. 50-50, a significant improvement on your Waitress tips. Wouldn't you say?" The cynicism of his proposal was breathtaking. He wasn't just trying to win. He was trying to corrupt the very essence of what Sinclair seemed to be seeking. "Mr. Sterling, Elara," said her voice cold, "I am not interested in your partnership. I am here to be myself, to create and to learn. If Mr. Sinclair deems me worthy of anything, it will be on my own merits, not as part of some manipulative scheme." Sterling's smile vanished, replaced by a familiar sneer. "Suit yourself, Waitress, but don't come crying to me when you're back serving lukewarm soup. Idealism doesn't pay the bills." He turned and stalked off. Elara felt a shiver of unease. Sterling was more dangerous than she'd thought, not just a bully, but a schemer willing to exploit and manipulate to get what he wanted. She wondered if Sinclair truly understood the depths of Sterling's character. Or was Sterling's presence here another part of some elaborate test, a catalyst for conflict and revelation? The next day, a small but significant incident occurred. Elara was adding color to a section of her mural depicting rare island orchids. She had mixed a specific luminous shade of violet the previous evening, leaving it carefully covered in her outdoor work area. When she arrived in the morning, the pot of violet paint was overturned, its contents spilled and dried uselessly on the stone paving. Nearby, a delicate section of her freshly painted work was smudged as if by a careless hand. Her heart sank. It wasn't a catastrophic setback, but it was disheartening and suspicious. The work area was sheltered. It couldn't have been an animal. Matteo, who happened to be passing by, looked concerned. "What happened here, Miss Elara?" "I'm not sure," she said, trying to keep the accusation out of her voice. "It looks like my paint was knocked over. And this part is smudged." Matteo examined the smudge. "This is unfortunate. Do you suspect an accident?" Elara met his gaze. "Perhaps. Or perhaps not everyone is pleased with my progress." Matteo's expression remained neutral, but his eyes were knowing. "I will ensure the area is cleaned. Please do not let this discourage you. Mr. Sinclair is very much looking forward to seeing your finished work." The celebratory dinner was held in the grand pavilion, transformed for the occasion with an abundance of flowers, soft candlelight, and the hauntingly beautiful strains of Lena Petrova playing her cello from a discreet corner. The guests were dressed in their finest, a nervous excitement palpable in the air. Mr. Sinclair was a gracious host moving between tables, engaging each guest in conversation, his eyes twinkling with an unreadable emotion. Elara found herself seated between Mrs. Gable and Dr. Thorne. Sterling was at a nearby table, conspicuously charming a visiting dignitary from a small island nation whom Sinclair had invited for the evening. He shot occasional confident glances towards Sinclair, as if certain of his own ascendancy. During a lull in the conversation as dessert was being served, an exquisite mango sorbet with crystallized ginger, the sky outside, which had been a clear star-dusted velvet, began to change. A sudden wind whipped through the pavilion, making the candle flames dance wildly. The distant rumble of thunder grew closer, more insistent. Sinclair said, looking out towards the rapidly darkening ocean. It seems the weather wishes to add its own drama to our evening. We are due for one of our seasonal squalls. Nothing to be alarmed about, but it can be quite theatrical. Indeed, the storm hit with surprising ferocity. Rain lashed down in blinding sheets, driven by gale-force winds. The lights in the pavilion flickered, then died, plunging them into momentary darkness before emergency lanterns strategically placed cast eerie dancing shadows. The sound of the wind and the crashing waves was deafening. Amidst the sudden chaos, a sharp cry of pain cut through the din. My ankle, oh my goodness. I think I've twisted my ankle. It was Mrs. Gable. In the sudden darkness and confusion as staff rushed to secure shutters, she had stumbled, her chair overturning. Immediately Dr. Thorne and Elara were by her side. Matteo and other staff members hurried over with flashlights. "Allow me, Mrs. Gable." Dr. Thorne said, his voice calm and professional. He gently examined her ankle. "Yes, it's swelling rapidly. We need to elevate it and get some ice." While Matteo dispatched someone for a first aid kit and ice, Elara helped Mrs. Gable to a more stable seat, offering words of comfort. She noticed Sterling across the room. He had risen not to help, but to peer out at the storm, a strange, almost exhilarated expression on his face, as if the raw power of nature somehow mirrored his own ambition. He cast a cursory glance towards Mrs. Gable's minor crisis, then turned back to the window, seemingly unconcerned. Sinclair, however, was watching everything, his expression unreadable in the flickering lantern light. The staff efficiently managed the situation, bringing blankets as the temperature dropped and more lanterns. Mrs. Gable, though in discomfort, insisted she was fine and didn't want to spoil the evening. It was then that a more urgent shout came from outside, barely audible above the storm's roar. "Help! The east pathway. It's a mudslide. Someone's trapped." One of the younger staff members, a gardener. Elara had often seen. Tending the orchids, burst into the pavilion drenched and frantic. "It's Kenji, Mr. Tanaka." He went for a walk before dinner towards the old observatory. The rain it brought down the hillside by the ravine. A cold dread filled the room. Kenji, the quiet tech prodigy, was out there in the teeth of this ferocious storm, potentially injured or worse. Without a second thought, Elara was on her feet. "I know that path. I've sketched there." "We have to go, Doctor." Thorne stood as well. "I'll come. I have some medical knowledge." Marcus Cole, the journalist, grabbed a heavy lantern. "Me too. I can help clear debris." Sinclair looked at the volunteers. Then his gaze fell on Sterling, who had remained rooted to his spot near the window. His earlier excitement now replaced by a look of distinct apprehension. "Mr. Sterling," Sinclair said, his voice quiet, but carrying an undeniable authority. "Your strength would be an asset. Will you join them?" Sterling hesitated. He looked from Sinclair to the raging storm outside, then back to the relative safety of the pavilion. It's incredibly dangerous out there, Sinclair. Perhaps we should wait for the storm to pass. Send the professional staff. We could be putting more lives at risk." Sinclair's eyes, ancient and wise, seemed to pierce right through Sterling's excuse. Moments of crisis, Mr. Sterling, often reveal true character. The professional staff are already mobilizing, but every capable hand is needed now. Before Sterling could prevaricate further, Elara Thorne-Cole and two of the resort's sturdier staff members, guided by the frantic gardener, were already heading out into the tempest, equipped with flashlights, ropes, and a first aid kit. The wind tore at them, the rain stinging their faces, but the thought of Kenji spurred them on. His eyes then moved to Sterling, who shifted uncomfortably under the direct scrutiny. "Mr. Sterling Sinclair," said, his voice devoid of its earlier warmth, now holding a distinct edge of steel. "You were presented with the same opportunity to help. You chose self-preservation, an understandable instinct perhaps, but not the instinct of a leader. Not the instinct of someone I would entrust with a legacy that is meant to benefit humanity, not just oneself." Sterling paled. "Now see here, Sinclair. It was a dangerous situation. It would have been foolish." "There is a difference," Mr. Sterling Sinclair interrupted, "between foolishness and calculated inaction when others are in peril. The truth, I believe, is that your primary concern was, and always has been, yourself." He paused, letting his words sink in. "My little charade as a janitor at the Argent was, as I mentioned, a way to observe. I saw your arrogance, your cruelty to those you deemed beneath you. I brought you here hoping that perhaps, away from your usual environment, a different side of your character might emerge. I am disappointed." Sinclair then turned to Elara. Her heart was pounding. "Ms. Vance," he said, and his voice softened, a genuine warmth returning to it. "When I first conceived of Isla Perdida and the purpose it might serve, I envisioned finding individuals who possessed not only talent, but a deep intrinsic kindness, a moral compass that guides them even when no one is watching or when the personal cost is high." He walked closer to her. "Your defense of me, of Henderson the janitor, at the Argent, was not an isolated incident. Tonight you showed that same courage, that same compassion on a much larger scale. You didn't seek reward. You didn't weigh the risks to your own ambition. You simply acted because it was the right thing to do." He smiled, a profound, genuine smile. "The legacy I wish to leave is not merely one of wealth, but of principle. It is a foundation dedicated to fostering innovation art and compassionate action, supporting those who, like you, strive to make the world more humane, more beautiful, more just." He took a deep breath. "Elara Vance. I have made my decision. I believe I have found the person I was searching for. The person who understands that true wealth lies not in what one accumulates, but in what one gives. The person to help guide the future of the Sinclair Foundation, to ensure its resources are used wisely, compassionately, and courageously." A collective gasp went through the room. Sterling looked thunderstruck, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. Elara felt tears welling in her eyes, a mixture of shock, gratitude, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. Mr. Sinclair, I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider it, he said gently. It is a significant undertaking. But I have every faith in you, Elara. You have shown that your art comes from the heart, and your courage comes from the soul. That is a powerful combination. The storm outside had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean, the air fresh and scented with rain and rejuvenated earth. In the quiet aftermath, a new chapter was dawning. Not just for Elara, but for the legacy of a kind and observant billionaire who had once masqueraded as a humble janitor. Elara, the waitress who had stood up for the unseen man, was now poised to become a guardian of a future she could never have imagined, all because of a single heartfelt act of defiance in a gilded restaurant worlds away. Her journey to the Mystery Island had indeed led to an unimaginable destiny. The real treasure of Isla Perdida wasn't its luxury, but the revelation of character it had so masterfully orchestrated. Elara's journey from serving tables to steering a major philanthropic foundation shows us that true worth isn't about wealth or status, but the courage to stand for what's right and the compassion we show to others, even when no one is watching. Mr. Sinclair, in his quiet wisdom, knew that the greatest investments are made in people of character. Elara's life was transformed, not by magic, but by her own integrity. What did you think of Elara's incredible story and Mr. Sinclair's unconventional methods? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of unexpected destiny and profound kindness moved you, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that good deeds can change the world, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one. Click that notification bell so you never miss an update.